as well. The way in which you'll be asked to represent externalities and to use them is in diagrammatic form. Right, I'm going to start with the two classic externalities. If you open most textbooks, even your textbooks from the AQA, the AQA approved textbooks, they'll just have two diagrams for externalities, which is a negative externality and a positive externality. But we could actually say that it's a negative externality of production and a positive externality of consumption. The key thing is, you always want to start with the market equilibrium, and the markets only consider private benefit and private cost. You know, we're selfish individuals. The firm is only focused on the cost of creating the good to itself, and in fact has an incentive to externalize cost because external costs are no longer having a negative effect on profit. So the more costs it can externalize, the higher the profit it gets for a given level of revenue. So it focused on private cost production. Again, individuals only consider the private benefits of consumption. They're not worried about the value to society, they only want to reflect the value to themselves. And that's the way the market works to decide the equilibrium for a product. That's okay when there's no externalities, and for the sake of simplicity, we tend to focus on the idea of production and consumption externalities separately, although you can create complex diagrams that have positive and negative externalities both of production and consumption, something that you might want to consider within cost-benefit analysis when you look at it. Yeah? You've got the idea of no consumption externalities. We're going to focus on production externalities, and it's a negative externality production. I draw in my social cost curve above my private cost. It's to the left. And as we know from demand and supply, basically a shift to the left of the supply curve is like a rise in costs. What we're factoring in is the extra cost to society from the creation of a good. So how factory emissions affect health levels in the local area, how it affects climate change, and the impacts that it has in terms of extreme weather events. And we come up with a situation where, although price is higher, the thing we're really interested in when we're talking about externalities and their impact on efficiency is about this axis, the x-axis, because it's about the allocation of resources. We're assuming that we're productively efficient in the way in which we allocate resources, but we see from the diagram that the efficient equilibrium of P1Q1 gives us a lower level of output than the market equilibrium at 0Q, which means we've got overproduction, and the overproduction is the distance Q1Q. So we've got market equilibrium at A, and we're considering private cost and private benefit, what we would talk about as our demand and supply curves, while if we factor in the extra cost to society of the act of production, we should be in an equilibrium at B, where social benefit is equal to social cost. What we get, because we are producing at Q, we get a situation where social cost is greater than social benefit at the output level Q. That means that the distance AC is actually our marginal external cost, because private cost plus external cost equals social cost. Yeah? We've got a welfare triangle, ABC, that represents our welfare loss. It's the output level, Q1Q, by which we're overproducing in a range where social cost is greater than social benefit. And you can see that if we're producing units where cost is greater than benefit, then welfare levels are being reduced. Yeah? Questions about why the curve is divergent. you'll see them parallel in some textbooks. I would say that a divergent curve is more reflective of reality. I'd say at higher output levels, a greater externality is caused. As you produce more cars, more smoke comes out of the factory chimney. And therefore, the impacts on the environment are greater. That's why I draw a divergent shift. The other advantage of a divergent shift is that you can factor in a policy solution to your diagram and it still looks good. Yeah? We'll come to that in a second when we look at the solution between these two situations. We'll switch to the other classic example of an externality, which is a positive externality of consumption. Again, the arguments are the same. Private benefit demand, private cost supply, demand equals supply should be efficient, but we've got some externality that means that this is a false equilibrium. Again, for simplicity's sake, production externalities are assumed out. We add in a marginal social benefit curve above our marginal private benefit curve, and we can create an efficient equilibrium at P1, Q1. Okay? In this case, we can see the market equilibrium, M, is at that point there, while the efficient equilibrium is above it. So in this is a case, it's an underconsumption of the distance Q, Q1. We've got the market equilibrium at point A, we've got the efficient equilibrium at point B, where social cost is equal to social benefit. And in this case, we can look at the relationship between private benefit and social benefit at the market output level, and we can see that there's a marginal external benefit that makes up the difference between the two, and that's the distance AC. And in fact, we have a welfare loss triangle, ABC, just as we have in the first diagram, but this time it's to the left of the efficient equilibrium rather than to the right of it as it is here. And that's our general rule. When it's a negative externality, your welfare loss is to the right of the efficient equilibrium because it's something we're overproducing or over-consuming. While if it's a positive externality, it's to the left of it, it's something we're under-consuming or under-producing. Okay? Again, divergent shift for the same reason, and a policy solution can be factored in. But these are your two classic externalities, basically. What we'll do, we'll keep it on the consumption side, seeing as we're talking about consumption, before we switch to policy solutions. And we'll come up here, and we'll look at a positive, we'll keep it on the consumption side, and we'll come down here to look at a negative externality of consumption, because again, it's a very popular topic, demerit goods for Econ 1, and also it's been used as a theme within Econ 3 questions as well. We've got marginal private benefit, we've got marginal private cost. Again, we'll assume out the production side by making social cost equal to private cost, therefore external cost is 0. We'll make P and the Q as the market equilibrium. And what we've got here is the need to factor in a negative externality of consumption. So this is the idea of passive smoking, or the idea of punch-ups in town on a Saturday night after too much booze. Yeah, where basically the policing cost associated with that and criminal damage associated with that is a cost to society. In this case, what we need to factor in is a marginal social benefit curve that is below our private benefit curve. So it's reduced by negative externalities of consumption. They are external costs in their nature, but what they do is reduce benefit. Okay? We've got a new equilibrium. Again, like I say, price axis not so important. The key axis is our x-axis, our quantity axis, because that's associated with the allocation of resources. And you'll see it's a similar situation as in this first diagram. It's a situation where we're doing too much of something by the distance Q, Q1, Q. Again, looking at our equilibriums, market equilibrium at point A, efficient equilibrium at point B. This time, if we look at our welfare loss, again it's to the right of the efficient equilibrium. The distance AC here equals the marginal external cost, and our welfare loss triangle is here. Yeah, it's the amount by which social cost is greater than social benefit over the range Q1Q. Yeah. Again, classic externalities, and also this diagram which represents a negative externality of consumption. You may see in textbooks, and indeed in a lot of resources that have been released even recently, you'll see a negative externality of consumption represented by this diagram here. No, but technically it's a production externality, because it's a supply side shift. So this is really the way in which we should represent a negative externality of consumption. The last one is a positive externality of production. We should be getting the hang of it by now. Private benefit, private cost, market equilibrium, P and Q. Trying to label your axes and curves and equilibriums all the time. It's a key thing. It's the one thing that examiners look at. I'm not sure it influences outcomes significantly, but it does, create question marks in the eyes of the examiner about the detail within your analysis. So it's worthwhile taking the time to label things accurately. Again, because we're in the act of production, we'll assume out our consumption externalities, social benefit, private benefit. External benefits are 0. And we put our social cost curve, this time to the right of the private cost curve, so it's associated with lower costs. The idea that the positive externalities of production actually lower the costs for the firm effectively, and should be something that encourage it to supply more at each and every price level. It's like a shift in the curve. P1, Q1, again, same as this position down here, where the market equilibrium is below the efficient equilibrium. It's something we're under-producing in this case. Market equilibrium, efficient equilibrium. In this case, we've got, oops. Yeah, I was doing something. Okay, so there. We've got a welfare loss on the left-hand side, because it's a situation where basically social benefit is greater than social cost over the range that we're overproducing. So this is our welfare loss area, ABC, and this is the efficient equilibrium. Okay, so that's the 4 externality diagrams. Like I say, the key thing is that production is a supply side action, consumption is a demand side action. This involves the marginal private and social cost curve. This involves the marginal private and social benefit curve. In terms of negatives and positives, it's about where your welfare loss is. Negative is to the right of the efficient equilibrium, so it's something that we're producing too much or consuming too much of. With positives, it's to the left of the efficient equilibrium, so it's something we're not producing enough of or not consuming enough of. Yeah? Simple